Hello, I am Adam, and this presentation is about censorship in the graphic memoir Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Throughout the entire story, censorship comes up as a theme throughout Satrapi's tale, but first, a quick overview of the plot. This story takes place predominantly in Iran. Iran's been going through some hard times with the rewrite of their original constitution during an Islamic revolution. Satrapi and her family then learned to deal with the new regime. The largest difference between the two constitutions is that the 1979 version stresses Islam more. It also gets rid of the Shah. Other than that, the two stress similar rights of the people. The post-revolution government is more reliant on censorship than the old one, which Satrapi uses to convey what living in Iran was like. The very first chapter of the book is entitled The Veil. During Satrapi's childhood, all the girls at school and around Iran had to wear head coverings, as is concurrent with Islamic tradition. She refers to it mostly through the novel as the veil. At first it's referred to as simple inconvenience, but the older version of Marjane later talks about the laws about appearance as a sort of social censor. When women have to be too worried with making sure everything about their appearance is correct, they aren't thinking about why they can't vote. While they are out and about in the city, they are too busy worried about being arrested because they forgot something about their appearance. They aren't thinking about their lack of rights. It works as an alarmingly effective way of censorship of ideas by occupying the mind with something else. Of course, the reason for the head covering is religious, and it isn't like the government came up with it overnight. Where the feeling of censorship comes from is the historical concept. After the revolution, the government started requiring women to wear the veil in public again. The women up to that point didn't have to if they didn't want to. This definitely comes out in Satrapi's book as she describes her various encounters with the Guardians of the Revolution. The Guardians of the Revolution are sort of the Islam police operating in Iran when the book was taking place. They make sure that the population follows all of the laws, especially the religious laws across the country. Marjane ends up having several encounters with both the male and female sections of this association. She even at one point distracts them by lying about someone else so they won't arrest her. The Guardians of the Revolution end up being the main instrument of the government to censor the population. They have the authority to arrest anyone that the individual soldiers believe are violating the law or the Islamic values of the country. This gives the Guardians the ability to arrest and eventually execute all those against the current regime and are speaking out about it. Another way people can get out of the Guardians' hands are by paying an absolutely huge fine. The fine isn't that much of a problem for families of substantial enough wealth like the Satrapis, but for those citizens who are poorer, it must be an enormous deterrent. Knowing that demonstrating against the government will either put you in prison forever, get you executed, or have to pay the fine would keep most people out of the streets demonstrating. Of course, the people that truly believed in the revolutionary cause would continue to do so. Later in the book, we find out that they were given a choice between swearing allegiance to the Islamic Republic or death. The grand majority of these revolutionaries who were arrested ended up being executed. By the state executing everyone who thought differently from them, they entered into a new realm of censorship, thought control. If there is no one on the streets demonstrating against the government, nor anyone speaking out against them in other ways because they are all dead, the number of people who would pick up that torch is greatly reduced. It is much easier for someone who doesn't have much of an opinion on the subject to join a large group demonstrating than to go out there by themselves. It is much easier to jump on the bandwagon than to start the bandwagon. On top of the difficulty of going out there by themselves, knowing that 95+% of the people that did this before them are dead is a major deterrent, because most people would like to stay alive. As the next generation comes in, the new regime looks even better because they don't have all these opponents, but the government who came before did, so then the next generation is less likely to rise up. The thought control of the people isn't just convincing people not to go out and demonstrate. It starts at a young age. When Marjane was still in school in Iran, they had sort of practices where all the girls would get together and the teachers would instruct them on beating their chests for the martyrs of the Islamic Republic. From a young age, the regime was ingraining in the populace that the government was amazing and everyone was invited to join their noble cause. Another main way that her school tried to influence how Marjane felt about the new Islamic Republic was by making her wear the veil. Since the new regime was now requiring hijab in all public settings, the youngest generation would be the most crucial for the indoctrination of the country into the new government's view on how religion should be conducted. After all, ingraining the religious values of the Shiite government into the country was the most important thing to the leaders of the revolution. In Iran's Islamic Revolution, in Comparative Perspective, Arjomand quotes Ayatollah Khomeini, one of the architects of the Islamic Republic, as saying, "We did not make the Islamic Revolution so the Persian melon would be cheap." This was his response when asked about the poor state of the economy. The government also had the young students participate in the most physical act of censorship in the book. The teacher led the class in removing pictures of the Shah from all their textbooks. An act like this is automatically putting in the heads of these children that their past is not worth remembering. Also, the students are taking part in getting rid of their history for those that were too young to remember pre-revolutionary Iran. How did this affect Marjane growing up? For one thing, anyone who has read the book can tell that she has always been against the status quo no matter where she was or who she was with. Satrapi starts out with demonstrating against the Shah. From that point on, she's always had a mistrust of whomever is in charge. This could explain why she was excited to get involved with the anarchists in Austria. The point I'm getting at is that all of the aforementioned cases where the government tried to censor the citizens of Iran was adding fuel to the fire in the case of Marjane. She is not only rebellious by nature, but her parents raised her to always question authority when it doesn't feel right. This rationalizes almost all of her behavior in Iran and in Europe. The effect is compounded when she returns to Iran after school. After experiencing the absolute freedom of Europe, which she was deprived of as a child in Iran, coming back must have been a huge shock to Marjane. Being in a strict environment is easier to cope with if that is the only environment you've ever been exposed to. Marjane felt the grip of the Islamic Republic more when she returned to Iran because she had been away for so long. Another reason why the effect would be compounded after returning would be because of the age that she was in while in Europe. High school is one of the best times in terms of personality development that humans have. Her personality developed in an almost restriction-free environment. Upon return to Iran, the hardest part of adjusting would be fitting her personality into the harsh confines of the Iranian Islamic policy. Lastly, Marjane Satrapi would have felt compelled to continue in her old habit of sticking it to the man in whatever way she could. Persepolis offers up an amazing behind-the-scenes look at a historic event that many people don't know much about. The censorship that is consistently displayed throughout the story is unjustifiable, even during times of war, because of the strife that it can cause the citizens of Iran.